I love a good traitor. Not in real life, in like the show, The Traitors, you know? But I've always kind of wondered ever since the show started, and this feels like an inevitable topic to talk about. Who is the greatest traitor of them all? That is what I'm here to do. From where I currently sit in the year of our Lord 2024. There have been 8 English language seasons of the hit show The Traitors, spanned across multiple countries. 2 US seasons, 2 UK seasons, 2 Australian seasons, and 1 season of Canada and New Zealand, at least for the time being. Plenty more seasons are coming, and the show is not slowing down anytime soon. But I felt that where we sit now with the sample size that we currently have, I wanted to do an update on everything that is The Traitors. So I did a full rewatch of every single season, took extensive notes on every single season and many of the players, faithful and traitors alike. Also, a little off topic, if you do enjoy The Traitors as a show, this is the channel to be at right now, because goddamn, I will be making videos on almost every single topic possible that has to do with The Traitors. Season ranking, favorite players, ranking the finales, the ideal strategy for both traitors and faithfuls, and of course, this video here, ranking every single traitor in the show's history. I really needed to start this off with a bang. We're in a post-Survivor 46 world and a pre-Big Brother 26 world. If there is a time to deep dive into the Traitors franchise, giving my opinion on everybody who donned the cloak and was deemed a traitor, feels like the perfect start. 38 people have been a traitor between 8 English-speaking seasons of the show. Whether you were a traitor for one episode or the entire goddamn season, you're gonna be on this list and ranked up against everybody else. And to make things perfectly clear, how I am judging these people are based on how they played as a traitor. If they were recruited and spent part of the game as a faithful, that doesn't matter to me. Simply how they do the moment they became a traitor till their demise, or win. But even with that, this was not an easy list to make. Far from it, actually. The first issue I ran across was the criteria I was going to have for what made somebody a good or bad traitor, because I think that can be entirely subjective. Longevity is an important factor, but win equity is as well. Where do you add somebody's social game or somebody's strategic game? Do you dock somebody who tried to make a move but failed more than somebody who didn't try anything at all? I still might not know, but trust me when I say a lot of time went into making this list, and I am very satisfied with the order that I made. And if you are not, I hope you can at least listen to my reasoning for each placement and not degrade me as a human being because I didn't rank your fave higher than you would like them. Because again, this is not some official list that everybody has to listen to. It's my personal list because I wanted to create a fun little YouTube video talking about something I don't believe anybody else has done yet. If you disagree, we can have a discussion in the comments below, but I don't ask for hateful attacks on anybody, those in the comments included. Let's keep it at least somewhat civil as we go. Light shade is allowed, but don't cross a line, and you know what I mean. Anyways, on the flip side, if you do enjoy this video and want to see all the Traitors content I have in store for you, I cannot recommend enough that you subscribe. It's very easy to do, will keep you updated in the easiest way possible of my new videos, and helps me more than you could ever imagine. We'd be besties for the resties. My final note is going to be a very obvious spoiler warning. Like, duh, I'm gonna be talking in depth about every single traitor in the show's history from every season, including details about those seasons. So if you do not wish to be spoiled, please watch these seasons first because all of them are worth it in some capacity. Or don't do that and continue watching. Either way, you've been warned. Enough chit chat. I got 38 damn people to rank, so let's dive straight into my personal ranking of every single traitor from every English language season of the Traitors franchise. Last place, baby, the worst of the worst. Who holds the title for being the single worst traitor in the show's history? A very special honor, I might add. Except for this guy, I mean it in the most disrespectful way possible, because number 38 is going to Kieran from the Traitors UK Season 1. Yeah, I have a bone to pick with Kieran because of that bullshit he pulled off in the final roundtable. He got completely outmatched and completely outplayed by Wilfred and decided to completely throw him under the bus on his way out so he would lose the game as well. That annoys the fuck out of me, but also not the point of the video. I'll talk more about that in my season ranking. But even aside from that, Kieran played terribly from the second he was recruited to the end of his run. In my opinion, players who were recruited very late into the season, like Kieran was, have no chance of winning the game. But I think Kieran did. There was little to no suspicion of him by the end of the game before the recruitment. However, the second he became a traitor, he began to play the game completely differently, and that is a terrible sign that you have been recruited. And all of it rooted in that he's way too fucking emotional and bitter. He was so scared that Wilf was going to betray him that he started acting out or acting irrational at every moment, publicly freaking out on Wilf anytime he thought Wilf was going to go against him, which is nothing like what he was prior to this moment. He's way too emotional under pressure, seems cool like a cucumber day to day until there was an ounce of suspicion thrown at him. He folded like a lawn chair. I don't trust you to do anything successful if you're going to fold that quickly as a traitor. And the most damning evidence of it all, he changed his strategy from looking for traitors to surviving. Now, I'm not saying that you have to play the game one way or another, like there is a much better way to play, but that's not for this video. But you need to remain consistent. When people are looking at you with a magnifying glass at all times, it's not a very good idea to give them reasons to do a double take or look at you with an even bigger magnifying glass. But to go from the guy who was one of the biggest traitor hunters the entire season, accusing people left and right and trying to suss out who the traitors are, to suddenly not really caring about finding the traitors or who they are, simply going into self-preservation mode and voting people out just to make sure it's not you, looks extremely suspicious. I do not think people would have expected Kieran to be at the very bottom, but when looking at all 38 traitors, I can name one positive or one aspect where I think that traitor didn't do the wrong thing or did things right. Kieran, I think at every single opportunity, did the wrong thing and was the sole reason he lost the game. Despite what he thinks about Will fucking him over, he tanked his own game and showed, at least to me, this guy is the worst traitor in the franchise's history. Trust me, I will not be talking about most people at the bottom of this list for as long as I talked about Kieran, but he felt like a special case. My number 37 kind of feels like the chalk pick to be at the very bottom because they are the only traitor to be voted out at the very first banishment. But I saved them from that dreaded spot and put them to second to last, and that's going to be Lauren from the Traitors New Zealand Season 1. Like, what else is there to say about Lauren? To be banished before anybody else in the game when the odds are so heavily in the Traitors' favor is really unfortunate and completely justifies her being at least towards the bottom of the list. But the reason she's not at the very bottom is because there were a good amount of people in that season that knew Lauren before the game and were friends with her outside of the show. That entire season kind of felt like a group of friends playing the Traitors together and they just happened to film it and release it to the public. So they knew her tells and know her regular demeanor and all of that stuff. So yes, shame on Lauren for being so obvious that everybody could tell she was acting differently from how she normally acts, but I think if she went into the game with a group of complete strangers, they would not know how she acts outside of the game. And it's very easy to clock something like that when you know a person. Like, imagine if it was your best friend on the Traitors and they know how you act and all of a sudden you become a traitor. They're going to notice different cues and little things that other people wouldn't notice. Yeah, I'm grasping at straws here. This is still a terrible game of the Traitors. She got voted out at the very first banishment. But there is that one little factor that at least is not a complete knock on her game and is what ultimately saves her from being at the very bottom, just one spot right above it at number 37. Now, number 36, we have another infamously bad traitor, this time dipping her toes into the Traitors Canada with Melissa B. She's pretty much exactly what happened to Lauren, where she was instantly clocked as being a traitor with her demeanor or how she was acting, except she was literally clocked by a group of strangers. So yeah, that's not a very good run for Melissa B, and some may argue, why isn't she below Lauren then, if the only reason I had Lauren above Kieran is for the exact same thing that Melissa B is doing now. So yeah, it was not a very good run for Melissa B, and some may argue, why isn't she below Lauren then, if she was clocked this early and doesn't have that same excuse that Lauren does? Well, for one, she does at least survive a roundtable. No matter what you say about how Melissa B played, surviving that first roundtable almost automatically put her ahead of Lauren in my eyes. But to add on to that, I feel like when she was heavily accused on her eventual boot episode, I think she defended herself well. She was clear and concise and had great arguments to the point where even Kevin, the person who was so positive Melissa was a traitor he thought his grandma could tell, she got him second guessing and almost changing his vote. But the only reason she was voted out is because the momentum was too far onto her and they couldn't just randomly change their vote to somebody else. It's a pretty poor run, third worst all time. But I think Kieran and Lauren are in a rotten tier at the very bottom, all by themselves, and then Melissa is just like slightly less smelly. So that's something, I guess. Now on to number 35. A great character, if nothing else, and I kind of feel she was put in a very shitty situation from the start, but also did not do themselves any favors when put into this shitty situation, and that's why I have her all the way down at number 35. It's Ash Pollard from the Traitors Australia Season 2. The obvious elephant in the room is that she got completely fucked over by Sam, like viciously thrown under the bus for his gain and his gain only. I'm not here to fault Ash for that situation happening because I think Sam does that no matter who his traitor teammates are, but like I was saying when introducing Ash and why she's so far down the list is because I think when she gets into the situation of being targeted by Sam, she does not do a very great job. She had plenty of outs in that moment. The only reason her name was under fire was because of Sam going to every single person and pushing her name with no real basis or evidence. She can diffuse that with logic and reasoning, which could have gotten her out of that vote. But instead what she does is run on pure emotion and pure anger. She targets Sam right back, which in itself is not a terrible move. It makes total sense, and if she gets her way, she looks like the hero now. But the manner in which she does it leans more into retaliation instead of actual evidence. Everybody is just assuming Ash is targeting Sam only because Sam was targeting Ash. Pair that with a really bad roundtable during her boot episode, she handles herself really poorly. And while from a personal and TV standpoint, I love seeing her give it to Sam because he is a prick. I'm here to judge people's games and games only, and she looks extremely bitter and guilty during this debate. Everything she does and says just makes Sam look better and obviously makes her look worse. So it's a really tough situation to be put in, but I don't think I had much faith in her as a player based on what happened after that situation, which is how Ash ends up down here at number 35. Number 34 might just be the single weirdest traitor on the entire list, and also the hardest one to rank. This person was recruited very late into the game with nearly a 0% chance of winning. But I also have no faith in them doing well or winning even if they weren't in this terrible situation. So fuck it, they landed at number 34, and that's going to Mickey from the Traitors Canada Season 1. Yeah, Mike recruited him because he knew Mickey was a dead man walking and would have been the next one banished, so I can't fault Mickey for immediately getting banished. But also, there's not a single strategic bone in this man's body. He feels stoned 24/7, and it's just kind of their vibe. I have zero faith that Mickey in any universe would be able to win the game as a traitor because I don't think he cares if he won or lost. And the main reason he's down here is because despite being in a terrible situation as a recruited traitor, there is an out. There is potential for Mickey to survive if he just gave any effort and fought for his life, even just a little bit. But none of that showed up when the time mattered most, and I can't reward somebody like that with anything more than number 34. I guess he isn't lower because I feel he didn't do a lot wrong. He just didn't do much of anything at all, which is better, I guess. I don't know. Moving on. Moving right along to number 33, I'll cut to the chase. If I had a nickel for every time somebody named Ash got screwed on the Traitors by another cocky male traitor, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? Yeah, it's the other Ash, but this time Ash from the Traitors UK Season 2. And no, Paul and Harry did not fuck over Ash as much as Sam fucked over other Ash. A lot of Ash's problems came from her simply being naive to everything going on around her. She assumed she wouldn't be called out as a traitor very early on. She assumed the traitors were going to work together the entire time. And she assumed that after getting backstabbed by Paul and Harry, all the traitors would just come together and act like nothing happened. It's truly asinine when you look back on it how complacent she became as her entire game was unraveling around her. But the plus side of Ash is I do think her social game was good. She was a good presence in the castle for people and had players who would have genuinely gone to the grave thinking she was a faithful. That takes some work. And after the tie vote situation that she barely survives, I think there was an opportunity to pivot and move forward successfully. And then she put herself in the dungeon. And that was the nail in her hypothetical coffin. I want to have more faith in Ash as a player because I see the potential there for her. But time after time after time, I felt she went about the situation she was in completely wrong. Which leads to her early banishment, and I can't put all the blame on Paul and Harry. Not even half. Ash made a lot of mistakes, and that's why she's number 33 on the list. Now it's number 32. One of the first ever traitors in the franchise's history was a chaotic figure all around and might just be a psychopath, but ended up being too big for his britches and simply was not a very good traitor. That's Angus from the Traitors Australia Season 1. This dude loved being a traitor. I think a little too much. It kinda scares me. Aside from that part though, overall he just felt too doe-eyed and bushy-tailed about the entire thing, thinking he was invincible as a traitor and not clearing up any of the little details that led to his eventual demise. He was called out very early as one of the 4 traitor suspects by Chloe. That is not good for Angus as the spotlight was right on him from early on. But after that point, he never tightened up his game, but instead got more sloppy, slipping up with words or never actively looking for traitors. He had a good social game, and I guess he thought his 2D level chess moves would carry him to the end of the game. All that did was confirm the inevitable to the point where the other traitors realized he was a liability, and you do not want to be a liability to your other traitors. That incentivizes them to turn on you. The optimal strategy is to show the other traitors you are useful to their game so you can work together until you gain the upper hand on them. And Angus just gave the other traitors a prime reason to send him home. He was not very good at all. The only argument you can maybe have in Angus's corner is that he survives a decent way into the season, but a lot of that is kind of thanks to Matt's stupidity and nothing Angus actually does. Number 32 is right where you belong, buddy. It's a bad game. Back to the Traitors New Zealand with number 31, it's Matt. And Matt is somebody that I did see a lot of potential in when he was first selected to be a traitor. He's so unsuspecting and can play from the shadows to sneak his way to the end of the game. But again, kind of like Ash, I think he became complacent in what he was doing. He would fully take the role as the himbo bumbling idiot of the cast that didn't know what he was doing or what the game was called. And it works for like a round playing like that and then throwing his vote because it would be haha funny. But after that first round, the game gets serious. And when a traitor is found so early and he is one of the few people that didn't vote out that traitor, he's being looked at with a magnifying glass. So Matt, you can't play as this bumbling buffoon anymore. Nobody is going to buy it. You're not that dumb. Pair that with the fact that he just got brodied. And what I mean by that is that the contestant Brody set their sights on Matt, and from that moment on, he was done for. There was no hope. Matt had all the ingredients to be a good traitor of the game, but he used them all wrong, and instead of making a 5-star meal with them, he threw it all in the microwave and called it a day. The potential is what keeps him from being any lower, but yeah, it's not great down here at the bottom. Matt ends up at 31. Number 30 is somebody that has the natural skills to be a great traitor, but also has a lot of issues that work against them, with nothing in the actual season that showed they can overcome those issues. So that's going to leave Claire from the Traitors Australia Season 1 at number 30. Claire got into trouble very early on due to, let's be honest, some bullshit with Hairgate. But the way she handled that early heat and played was really impressive and got basically all suspicion off of her for the early part of the game. So that's a plus that she has above everybody else I've talked about so far. What stops her from reaching any higher on the list is the way she plays the game from the moment Angus gets banished to her demise. She took that as a sign of betrayal by her other traitors, getting mad at them for betraying Angus. But that's not how you should be playing the game. You getting angry or showing you feel distrust between the other 2 traitors just gives them way more incentive to throw you under the bus and get you banished. And when that exact thing happens and Claire starts getting heat again, she does not handle it nearly as well the second time around. Getting super emotional, and you can see the toll that being a traitor is having on her. Which is fine, I'm not criticizing Claire as a person for that. But when I'm ranking people in this game, somebody who cannot handle being a traitor and will crumble under the pressure is not somebody I can rely on to win this game. Claire showed early that there may be some potential there to be a good traitor, but your true colors are shown when your back is against the wall, and Claire showed she isn't as great of a traitor as I originally thought, which leaves her at number 30 on the list. At number 29, we are now talking about our first traitor from the US franchise. Funny enough, we're going to be going on a string of US traitors for these next few rankings, but the person that I personally think was the worst traitor in the US franchise is Cody from Season 1. Cody Calafiore was the worst traitor in my personal opinion, but I don't believe he was necessarily terrible by any means. To start, Cody came into this game with a massive target on his back. Like potentially the biggest on the cast with his recent domination of Big Brother All-Stars. So that made the game have to be played on hard mode from the jump for him. Yeah, I think Cody has a really great strategic mind for these games, despite what people say trying to hate on him. Added with him surviving a good chunk of banishments, basically to the halfway point of the season is what gets him to this point on the list. But why he ends up being the worst traitor from the US franchise is because I think I have the least amount of faith in Cody to win the traitors out of everybody from the US seasons. The most glaring issue I have with Cody is that this game is way too much for him. He clearly has trouble having to lie and keep that lie 24 hours a day, something he doesn't necessarily have to do in Big Brother when he plays. That internal struggle was weighing on him to the point that he simply breaks and tells Kyle this unnecessary lie about something Ryan told him before he conveniently died, which really screwed him over due to Cody being paranoid the entire time. And yes, he survives that initial banishment over Kyle, but from that moment going forward, he was not long for the game and gets banished the very next roundtable. And even then, he's only cleaned from those first 3 banishments because of the Michael, Brandy, and Kate debacle, in which if that didn't happen, I think Cody gets found out much earlier and cracks much earlier as well. Overall, I just don't think it's a great traitor's game. You can see the positives with his social connections and still having people that didn't think he was a traitor until the very end. But I simply cannot rely on Cody to stay strong and make it to the end as a traitor, which is the most damning evidence and why he's left here at number 29. Number 28, we're obviously staying with the US franchise, but instead moving on to who I felt was the worst traitor in Season 2. And this might be a blindside because it's not who you think it would be. Instead, I have Kate here. And you could easily disagree with me here, and I would be open to hearing those arguments. But in my latest rewatch, I wasn't compelled with anything Kate did as a traitor. Now overall, I feel she has really good reads on people. Despite playing it up for the TV sometimes, you can see there is a strategic mind in there that can map out what people are thinking or what the optimal move is. However, I don't think she executed any of that during the season. It felt like this massive lead up to Kate after 2 seasons finally becoming a traitor, and she just didn't care. She overcompensated way too much to try and cover up that she was recruited to be a traitor, like trashing Phaedra after defending her all day made no sense and only got people to start looking at Kate as a potential traitor, or being somebody that clearly didn't have an endgame plan. Now, granted, neither did Phaedra towards the end, but it felt like Kate's strategy was going to the end with Phaedra and then seeing what happens. But when Phaedra got exposed and voted out, she had no other game plan. And considering Phaedra was targeted round after round after round, to not even consider another option at that point and just assume Phaedra was going to survive it made no sense to me. And then of course the infamous move at the end of choosing to end the game when it's so unbelievably obvious there's still a traitor left was all I needed to know to show why she isn't that high on the list. Yeah, I pretty much just trashed Kate's game the entire time, but there's still positives to be had. She was never a suspect up until Phaedra left the game, which is good on her. She was clearly outmaneuvering Phaedra and had a much better read for the game than Phaedra did. Somebody who was a traitor the entire game and had all the information compared to somebody who came in literally halfway through the season and was a faithful for a majority of it. That is all good. But the bad still exists, and I think that outweighs the good, and that's why I'm not very high on Kate's game and put her at number 28. Number 27, we're moving right back to US Season 1. A bit of a boring traitor, and not a great traitor in the grand scheme of things. I have Ari. Ari might be the most baseline traitor in this entire list, in the fact that there is nothing fun to talk about his game. I think he's good socially and genuinely was never suspected of being a traitor pretty much the entire season. but especially when he became a traitor himself, which is what I'm focusing on. And that's good, and that takes some skills, but everything else feels weak. He instantly just hops onto Cerie's coattails and does everything that she says to do without ever really having a thought of his own. Which, yes, is fine when you're trying to make it far, but so naive of him to just assume he and Cerie are gonna run to the endgame together and win together and just live happily ever after. However, I am giving that credit to be a positive for Cerie's game and less of a negative to Ari's game. But it doesn't excuse how passive he plays the game, and embarrassingly so. It's almost as if everything that happened literally got handed to him. Getting the shield all 3 times, being recruited to be a traitor, skating by to the end while Ari did nothing actively to help himself and ensure he would be the one to win. And of course at the end when Cerie inevitably betrays him, Ari just gives up, quits the game and admits he's a traitor right then and there. And to see that this is how Ari reacts to the literal first sign of adversity is really telling of how he is as an overall player. On paper, Ari doesn't look half bad, and I think if you gave him 100 attempts, he's gonna make it far most of the time just based on his personality. But when you dive into the specific game and see how he played, he didn't have to do a damn thing, and he still didn't win. So he's gonna land at number 27 on the list. Number 26, we will wrap up the little US Traitors train we've been riding with the person I'm assuming you all have been waiting to come on the list. And I can only rank him so high, and that is of course Dan Giesling from the Traitors US Season 2. Yes, I fully understand that out of maybe anybody on this list not named Kieran, Dan has made the most mistakes of any traitor from any franchise. He played the game exactly how he played Big Brother, where he plays possum at the start, creating individual social bonds that he will utilize later in the game when numbers get smaller, and eventually take over. The only issue is the Traitors is a vastly different game from Big Brother. There is no hiding, he isn't allowed to play possum. The entire point of the game is that anybody could be a traitor, so everybody is a suspect. Dan cannot simply vanish into the background, he's gonna get looked at. And if he isn't doing anything that is helping the faithfuls, he will be thought of as a potential traitor. And that, with there being so much less time to socialize and connect in the Traitors than there would be in Big Brother, Dan's strategy from jump was never going to work and he was done for. Underestimating everybody who wasn't a competitive reality TV game player, Peter and Phaedra especially, I cannot physically excuse what was going through Dan's mind with the shield bluff that basically ended his game. For somebody that voted for you at the round table to tell you a secret because he quote unquote trusts you, should be the biggest red flag in the world that he's lying. But Dan just did not believe Peter had the capabilities to lie, and that cost him nearly his entire game. And then of course targeting Phaedra at the end was not bad processing, but not planting any seeds about this and bringing this as a blindside at the round table is of course great TV, and that is what Dan is all about. But it's terrible for Dan if he wants to actually survive because he didn't give the players enough time to process if Phaedra is a traitor. So they defaulted back to voting him out and he obviously gets banished. All of that is the bad I see in Dan's game, which is a lot. But I don't think this is some worst game ever, and I'll do my best to explain why he is at what I presume will be a high 26 out of 38 to most people. To start, I simply have infinitely more faith in Dan as a game player and as a traitor specifically than the 3 we just talked about. He would do anything to survive and do anything to win, where I feel the other 3 people would not. That, and I feel like other things people have been criticizing Dan for should not be placed solely onto Dan's shoulders. He gets called out for being quiet very early on. Some people may say, oh, well, just start speaking up more. He can't. He's put in such a terrible situation for being a quote-unquote quiet guy. If he starts speaking up out of nowhere, it's weird and brings attention to himself. But if he stays quiet, he's gonna bring attention to himself in the opposite direction. So he has to play in this perfect middle ground the entire game, which I feel he did for at least a good portion of his time out there. Then you have Ekin Su getting poisoned and killed by Parvati, really screwed over Dan. That's another stopgap of somebody that would get banished in front of him that he can't use anymore and just accelerates his end. Also, we can add he had numbers on his side too. People who were working with him at many points where there should be no reason he would be anything other than the first one banished. That's where I'm going to end my thoughts on Dan, because he had the largest target that has ever been given to somebody on the Traitors ever, period. and that is not going to deduct for how he played this season. If anything, it makes these moves Dan made more understandable. There is about a 0.00001% chance that Dan wins the season of the Traitors because in no universe is anybody sitting at the end of the game with Dan Giesling and choosing to end the game there. So he needs to play from the start and pull off the biggest and baddest moves possible. It's not simply about surviving. He needs the perfect outline and the perfect boot order to even be given a fraction of a chance to win the game. A lot of other people that I'm going to be talking about on this list were given much better starting points than Dan was. Dan was given a shitty situation, so he had to play from that shitty situation. So a lot of his moves, I can't blame him for, or I at least have to give him credit for trying to get himself out of that situation. That doesn't harm his game. It doesn't boost his game, but it's not a total negative. We can't act like everybody on this list is on an even slate, because they're simply not. So with all of those factors combined, it allows me to have sympathy for Dan and show, while that, yes, this is not a good Traitors game, he's not the worst traitor ever, and he wasn't even the worst traitor on his season. Enough Dan talk, I know y'all are sick of me, but I needed to come to his defense one last time and put him at number 26. Top 25, baby! And we're finally out of this US purgatory. Talking about a traitor who made it to the end of the game with nobody else but the Traitors. And yet, I don't think they played that great of a game, and I'm here to explain why. I got Camille from the Traitors Australia Season 2. Yes, Camille made it to the end of the game. Yes, Camille was a great faithful. But that doesn't just allow you to rank high on this list. And Camille has some major flaws that are not discussed enough because of the results of the season. To start, there is zero excuse why Camille did not turn on Blake and Sam, or at the very least Sam. Going to the end of the game with Blake and Sam gave Camille a 0% chance to win. And it's not like her only option to make it to the end was to go with these two. When she was first recruited to be a traitor, she had complete knowledge of the game and complete leverage with all of the faithfuls and now all of the traitors. She has the game in her hands and did nothing about it. Round after round after round where the numbers were there to turn on Sam and then eventually cutting Blake, Camille was right there to potentially be the winner of that season. But she isn't. And I have nobody else to blame but her. So yes, I'm going to forever be grateful to Camille for that amazing moment at the end of the season. But I have so many critiques for her game. She was in a wonderful position no matter what. But I fear she chose the safe route to the end, which ended up costing her the win and costing her a higher placement on this list than number 25. Number 24, we have somebody very similar to Claire, where I saw a lot of potential in them as a traitor, but in action they were clearly not ready to be a traitor. However, I saw some inklings that gave me more faith in her than at least Claire, and that's Alyssa from the Traitors UK Season 1. Her game, on paper, is pretty much identical to what Claire was doing. Way too committed to working and helping her fellow traitors, really bad performances when under the microscope or under pressure, and made it about halfway into the season because she was a more under-the-radar player. So in theory, she might even be justified to be ranked under Claire and under these people I just talked about. But that isn't how I see it. I saw strategic potential in Alyssa, and a lot more than I saw in everybody I've talked about not named Dan Giesling or Cody Calfiore. She would plant seeds in faithfuls' minds and knew how to stay under the radar while also acting like a faithful. If there was an award for somebody to be able to embody a faithful game, Alyssa would be a nominee for sure out of this entire list. I really do feel that if Alyssa didn't struggle when being confronted, she would be a great traitor. And it's that potential that I see in Alyssa that bumps her higher on this list up to number 24. Reaching number 23, we've moved up a hypothetical tier. The players I've talked about are the contestants where I feel they actively played poorly more often than they played well. Everybody from here on out, I have more positives to talk about. Unless they're the next two players I'm about to talk about. These two I call my unique circumstances. These are players that were only traitors for one round. Yes, one single round. But I don't think they played bad by any means. I think they got completely screwed over. So they are the ones that will mediate the players who played bad from the players who played good. Starting it off with Robbie from the Traitors New Zealand Season 1. Some of you may be asking, wait, Robbie was a traitor? Yes, Yes, she was. And oh my god, Robbie might be the most screwed over player in the history of the Traitors. Targeted from the jump for no reason, never getting any allies, and then was recruited for the sole reason to be thrown under the bus at the next roundtable. She had no chance of surviving, and even played decently well, I thought, in her final round, but was pretty much a scapegoat, and I can't put that against her. So technically, she didn't play as bad as the players I've talked about so far. Kinda by default, she's made it all the way up to number 23. 22 is very similar to Robbie, except I feel they did more actively to try and get out of their shitty situation. And that's Ross from the Traitors UK Season 2. Ross was recruited because Harry and Andrew knew he was about to get targeted and banished the very next day. So Ross had no hope in the game. But more so than Robbie, he realized the predicament he was in and tried to change it. He made an attempt to divide Andrew and Harry against each other to hopefully get them to stop looking at him and then target each other. Which is reasonable thinking because if you get recruited to be actively targeted by two other people, you need them to look elsewhere. And if they look at each other, that's almost best case scenario. But it just didn't work out and led to his inevitable demise because Zach would not let go of his fucking neck. Again, not much to say, Ross was screwed over, but he didn't do much wrong, leaving him all the way up here at number 22. Number 21, and now we move on to the players I think have more positives than negatives. And number 21 is the worst of them all, I guess. And for sure the messiest of them all. That honor going to Christian from the Traitors US Season 1. Now, if you told me that Christian after episode 1 and 2 would be ranked even as high as 21 on an all-time Traitors list, I would be shocked. So good for Christian for that at least. But he's just so out there, an extremely over-the-top and cocky player. But I think that kind of worked as a positive in his game, at least some of the time. His over-the-top nature and continuous role as the loud traitor hunter made him seem like a faithful to people. Paired with a great social game, I'm a little confused on why I feel so good about Christian. Now the issues come in for these same reasons I talked positively about him. He's way too over the top. He was sitting pretty with no issue and then just publicly told everybody he was recruited to be a traitor, but declined. Idiot. There is no logical sense in that move aside from Christian thinking it would be really fun television and wanting to make a big move for a big move's sake. Everything that we say and we're told should lead to the conclusion that Christian was not good at the Traitors. But he's better than you would expect, and the body of work leads him all the way up to number 21 on the list. Top 20, baby. We're truly moving right along, but still not at the point of talking about the great Traitors games we've seen so far. To kick off the top 20 is going to Miles from the Traitors UK Season 2. I think on paper, Miles has everything you would want to be a great traitor. That's kind of the reason why he was recruited night 1. He's unsuspecting and really great socially. But I feel in action, there were some squandered opportunities. When the Paul and Harry versus Ash feud developed, Miles was perfectly set in the middle. He had so much leverage and so much opportunity to advance his own personal game during those rounds. But he didn't. He fell complacent and sat on his hands until that dreaded poison chalice, where I do think he got completely screwed over and was looked at as a suspect much earlier than I thought he would have if it was just a normal murder. And even then, he defended himself very well and nearly got the room to shift. So I think Miles has the potential and the pieces to be great and ultimately got screwed over. But at the same time, there were opportunities in his game to do a lot better than he did that he kind of just left off the table. Like not splitting up the Paul and Harry duo, which I feel he absolutely could have done. But the cutthroat nature isn't there in Miles, so he can only rank so high to kick off the top 20 at number 20. Number 19 is an icon of the game that I feel played as well as she possibly could have given the circumstances. At the same time, I gotta be realistic with my ranking, and that led me to number 19 for Miss Parvati Shallow. I'll start it now. Parvati was never winning this game under any circumstances. So that's why she's unable to be ranked any higher than she is right now. But goddamn it, she tried her damn best despite everything working against her. She was a target from minute 1 by Sandra and Larsa. She got so screwed over by Dan wanting to murder Bergie when she had it clocked that Peter was lying to them. And she got screwed again by Peter during the seduction because he denied it. Those were 3 massive hurdles and obstacles that she had to overcome to even get a chance at surviving that were not her fault. And I felt she worked as best as she could despite them. Pushing a Larsa vote and dividing the cast between game players and housewives worked really well for her. Turning and then working with Peter was her only option, and it nearly worked out. And I think every move she made was calculated and thought through, which is what I want in a great traitor. But the preconceived notion of her being literally Parvati freaking shallow was too much to overcome, and I can't exactly fault her for that. But at the same time, I don't know what to do with that. If she came into the game as an unknown and played the exact same way she did, I think she has a chance to win the whole game. I have more faith in Parvati as a traitor than anybody else I've talked about so far, so that is why she's up here at number 19. Number 18 is somebody where if I didn't do this full rewatch and ranked every traitor just based on my memory, they would be way higher on this list. I thought this guy was one of the best traitors that didn't win the game. But on the rewatch, I was very wrong, and now find his game to be pretty overrated. And that's Nigel from the Traitors Australia Season 1. Yeah, the hostage dude who seemed really likable, that guy. I was so convinced he kind of dominated the game. Was the OG traitor who made it the furthest of that group. But as the season went on, I realized that he didn't actively do much of anything to help himself. Now, socially, he was impeccable, trusted by a ton of people, both traitors and faithful alike, which put him in good positions in the early game, and was also willing to cut traitors when need be. All good things. But the endgame truly is a mess and truly exposes that Nigel was kinda coasting on his natural ability to be liked and trusted. For one, his ride or die in Marielle gets completely blindsided and banished while he had no idea. From then on, he kind of realizes he's on the outs, but just kind of went with the flow, and that isn't how you play the traitors as a traitor. You can't just wing it when you have such an advantage and so much more knowledge than anybody else. You have to plan out in advance in order to further yourself in the game. But it feels like Nigel didn't do that. There seemed to be no genuine plan for him once he got to the endgame and simply faded away into the background until he was banished. He thought his social game along with baseline strategy would work and last him until the end, and while it lasted him for a while, it was never going to avoid interrogation, and he's not very good under pressure either. So while Nigel seems like somebody who should kill it as a traitor, and he did do well, he wasn't very good at the little things, and somebody that I don't really trust to ever win if you simulated that season 100 times. So it's good, but not good enough to reach any higher than number 18. Number 17 is somebody who I feel almost the exact same way about as I do Nigel, except I dropped more on my opinion about Nigel than Amanda from the Traitors UK Season 1, who is at number 17. All my comments I had with Nigel are pretty much the same with Amanda. Socially, so great and came across as very trustworthy to a lot of people, and had zero suspicion on her for 3/4 of the game. Super impressive when you look at that on paper, which is what I thought too before my rewatch. But very similarly to Nigel, strategically, I thought Amanda was very flawed. She was more willing to live and die with the traitors instead of turning against them. And then she turned on her number one ally, that being Theo, so quickly with no real remorse, which looked extremely shady and is what led to her ultimate demise. Where I feel if she had planned that out more and wasn't kind of going on her natural instincts, she could have survived that, or she could have maneuvered that a lot better than she did. So yeah, strategically, I don't see much ability there at all. But compared to Nigel, I see Amanda as more capable of winning the game. She just didn't this time, jumping one spot above him at number 17. Number 16 is somebody I'm shocked is actually ranked this high, because unlike with Nigel and Amanda, on paper this guy had no business being this high on the list. But I gotta give credit where it's due sometimes, and that credit will go to Andrew from the Traitors UK Season 2. This dude of all people was a goodish traitor. I know, it makes no sense. But going through his time as a traitor, he immediately clocked that Paul and Harry would vote him out the first chance they get. Their personalities and true intentions really showed in the Traitors turret, and that is where Andrew realized he's going to have to be a more valuable asset to one of those two guys, or else they're going to team up against him. And that's exactly what he did, getting close to Harry and turning on Paul the first chance he got in order to be Harry's new number one. Day to day, Andrew was really good at turning any suspicion off of him and embodying the role as a faithful, even if that doesn't come naturally to him based off of his appearance of being this jacked dude. And I thought he handled the situation with getting called out by Ross well enough. Not perfect or anything, but avoided banishment at the next 2 ceremonies after that. So you have to at least give credit there. That's all the good from Andrew that I feel was impressive. So now I'm going to get to the bad, which is only one note if I'm being honest, but it's important nonetheless. Andrew, buddy, you are too damn passive, man. The reads were there, the scenarios were all right there to be taken and used to his advantage, but he did nothing. Oh my god, was it frustrating to see Andrew go roundtable after roundtable, surviving them, yes, but not taking advantage and letting all of his numbers and allies get murdered or banished. The endgame that Andrew thought was best to him was with Harry, and I just don't understand how that thought can cross his mind. It's such a shame to see Andrew do all of this good work, but willingly walk into the endgame against a known trio. He had no chance to win at the end, and that's the most damning thing against his game and why I can't rank him higher despite making the endgame and despite making good moves. It's a real shame, but not all bad. Obviously good enough to be in the top half of the list. He'll land at number 16. Number 15 is somebody who was not a traitor for very long at all, but I can't help it. I think they played very well, but just came up short. Colin from the Traitors New Zealand Season 1 was wonderful. To start, his biggest strength by far are his words. He could talk his way out of a max security prison, I swear to God. I get caught in a trance when he talks. But he's extremely calculating at the same time. Any form of suspicion that came his way was immediately and beautifully shut down by Colin. And he went to war and nearly won against another very good traitor that I will be talking about later on this list. So I have more faith in Colin than I do for probably most people I will be talking about that I actually ranked higher. But I also have to look at the body of work we were given, and the results play a factor in that. Colin's biggest mistake is how he willingly took a backseat to Brooke right when he was recruited. I understand the rationale that Colin had and why he did that. Brooke was the big bad leader of the group to that point, so he wanted to act like he was loyal to Brooke and stab him in the back, take him down from within. The only issue with that is by hitching onto Brooke, Brooke took advantage of that and made sure the endgame was set up in his favor to take down Colin, something Colin was unable to overcome. And even to that point, the timing in which Colin went for Brooke was not right. I get that Brooke was also going for Colin at that moment, but it would have benefited both of them to stick together at least until the final 4 or maybe even the final 3. Targeting each other at 5 leaves the other one wide open moving forward in the endgame. So even if Colin managed to defeat Brooke, he was a sitting duck by the endgame. I love all of the reasoning Colin had for why he made the moves that he did, but they weren't perfect. And unfortunately, when we get to this point in the list, you have to have more to your game than just potential. So Colin ends up at number 15. Number 14, we are finally back to the Traitors Canada Season 1. The second best traitor from that season was Kuzi. I'll talk through the positives right away. To start, strategically and socially, there aren't that many players that are better. And while on a move-by-move basis that may not be necessarily true, she has a mind for the game, and that is something that not many people are naturally gifted with, which Kuzi was. Kuzi was so good socially that she wasn't even suspected for half the season. Not a single person dared to even utter Kuzi's name. That is her power, and that right there is plenty good enough to rank pretty high on the list. It's that confidence I have in her that is better than everybody I've talked about so far. Now for the issues I see in Kuzi's game. While I appreciate and respect her mind for the game, she can get a little sloppy or a little eager sometimes. Like when she got the shield after a team challenge and decided to murder somebody on her own team. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, because that something was not very good for Kuzi's game and eventually led to her vote out. That and Kuzi takes things way too personal. Kuzi is the type of person where she can laugh and joke and have a great time banishing and murdering these people. But the second her name is mentioned as a candidate for banishment, the jokes are over and she turns to verbally eviscerate whoever is trying to come for her. Which, like, it's good television. I'm not complaining about that, but that's not somebody I trust in the long term because everybody's name is eventually going to be brought up in this game. And if she's unable to control that aspect of her personality, it's going to rub people the wrong way, which it did. And it's going to make people more suspicious of her, which it did. Kuzi's game was not terrible by any means. Far from that. That's why she's at 14. But I fear there are some parts of her game that I don't think she can fix that's always going to harm her chances of winning, which will leave her right where she is at number 14. Number 13 is somebody from one of the earlier seasons of the Traitors that I feel was playing a near flawless game up until one fatal mistake unraveled their entire game. And that's Marielle from the Traitors Australia Season 1. Man, Marielle was killing it for so much of the game from the start. She, like Angus, was called out by Chloe as a traitor right off the bat. But unlike Angus, she handles this brilliantly and takes away all suspicion that was initially put on her despite being in the spotlight. She turned and led the charge to take out Angus, somebody who was a wounded animal and would make her look so much better if she can get the credit for that traitor blindside. Worked perfectly. Same thing with Claire. Saw where the train was moving, who it was about to run over, and made sure she led the charge in order to look like a faithful. That was all great and really amazing. Up until Fee was murdered. She overplayed her hand and made up an unnecessary lie about who Fee was suspicious of for literally no reason. It completely tanks her game, gets all the suspicion onto her, and leads to the faithfuls completely blindsiding her. One of the only times in the show's history to date where the person banished had no idea their name was going to be written down on anybody's parchment, let alone get her enough votes to be banished. Overall, it's a really underrated game with how great Marielle was playing for 90% of it, but that one single mistake in that one single round unraveled her entire game, and I have to dock her because of it, so she lands at a nice and comfy number 13. I might be a crazy bitch for this take, but I just feel this person is very similar to what I said about Colin, except played the end game way better and nearly won it despite being recruited so late into the season. And that's Kate from the Traitors Australia Season 1. I really do feel like Kate played an excellent Traitors game considering how late she was recruited and the situation she was in where she had to overcome Alex. Socially and strategically, Kate had this game clocked. She understands what needs to be done in her new role and what her best path to the endgame is. She needed to work with Alex at least enough to make it towards the endgame stretch and turn on her at the very last moment to win the whole thing, because she isn't naive and knows that Alex would turn on her too. So she navigates that endgame stretch so well and has the win right there in the palm of her hands if she just does one thing different. She needed to kill Craig. Craig was Alex's ace up her sleeve, that trap card that she had and knew she could use to take down anyone and everyone. And Kate realized this way too late and missed her opportunity to weaken Alex and potentially win this game. Who knows, maybe Alex would have never let Craig die at the end. But that is one single move that kinda turned this game out of Kate's favor and into Alex's. If Kate and Alex are at the end of the game with anybody else that isn't Craig, there's a very good chance that Alex gets voted out and Kate wins the game. So it's a great traitor game, despite being very short-lived. But to not win the game with that tragic mistake will leave Kate at number 12 overall. Oh boy, my number 11 person is a very hot and cold figure in the Traitors realm. Most people I think will yell at me for having them too low at number 11, and I'm ready to argue my life away because number 11 is still very, very good, but I will be explaining why I believe Phaedra Parks from the Traitors US Season 2 is not a top 10 traitor in the history of the franchise. Like with most of the entries at this point, I'll start again with the positives that get Phaedra into this tier and why at the very least she was in consideration for the top 10. There are two aspects of Phaedra's game that I think are better than anybody else who has played the Traitors before. She has, in my opinion, the greatest social game of all time. There's only one person who we will eventually talk about that I feel even competes with Phaedra and what she did. She had so many people feeling so good about her, not even worrying about her for most of this game. That was the power she had socially. And then I believe Phaedra is also the best debater or speaker we have ever seen in the Traitors, and this one isn't even close to me. When she was put into a situation where she had to defend herself again and again and again, she did it masterfully and brilliantly. And the part that I find most impressive about it is I feel all of those arguments and defenses were on the spot. On the fly, Phaedra is able to articulate herself so brilliantly that she could destroy players coming at her who spent hours preparing an argument against her. And of course, the main reason Phaedra was eventually exposed and caught as a traitor was because Dan called her out at his final hour, which is not her fault and pretty much screwed her over for the rest of the game. So that right there is my case and my argument in favor of Phaedra Parks. Now let me explain the negatives of her game and why that keeps her out of the top 10. To start, this is something I remember thinking on my first watch and was begging to be proven wrong on the rewatch, but unfortunately wasn't. Phaedra does not have a single strategic bone in her body. Her entire game plan is to participate and agree in conversations, but not actually add much of anything to them. And that strategy is fine for conversations and proved to work, but why in the fuck did she bring that strategy into the Traitors meetings? Are you fucking kidding me, Phaedra? Out of all the murders throughout the entire season, she was responsible and added input to Tamra's murder, which was a stupid murder. If you're going to play the numbers game and ride to the end with your housewives, which I believe she wanted to do, just ride to the end with your housewives. They're gonna think one or more of you are the traitor, so you might as well keep as many of y'all possible to give the opposition a harder time in finding you out. They're gonna think you guys are the traitors anyways. But that's irrelevant, because I want to talk about the way she played towards the endgame. Yes, I think Phaedra got fucked over by Dan calling her out, but there were so many options for Phaedra to at least be in a better position for the win than the one she put herself in. Phaedra had a group of players who were loyal to her to a fault. Kate, Sheree, and MJ were all in her corner. All three players who were at the end of the game with Phaedra. And on the other side, you had Peter and Trishelle, the figureheads who were hot on your tail. So Phaedra decides, or should I say, lets other people decide to kill Kevin and John. What are you doing, girl? Trishelle should have died years ago. Peter is fine because he'd get himself voted out after time. But she just thought her social game was going to carry her to the end without having to do anything. And that was so frustrating to watch. And then recruiting Kate was possibly the worst decision she could have made. Kate was probably the only person in that castle who would have never written your name down. That is somebody you keep as a faithful and use that blackmail for someone better, like try to get Peter to join you or he dies, or get CT or somebody else on the other side with you. But she just wanted her friend in the castle. I'm sorry, that's a dumb decision. Even ignoring the decision to recruit Kate, she let Kate take the lead and had Kate controlling everything they were doing from that moment forward. I have no defense for what was going on in Phaedra's head, and if I'm ranking every single traitor in the show's history, how could I possibly rank somebody that is a negative in the strategic game as high as top 10? I can't. Now, in every aspect that isn't strategic, Phaedra is amazing, and that is what got her this high in the first place. But y'all need to chill sometimes because Phaedra is a tad overrated, only because there's nothing in her brain that thinks one step ahead or maps out a plan. It's playing on instincts and likability, which can only get you so far. Even with Dan screwing her over in the game, I can't excuse what is right in front of me. Do you really think Phaedra could have won this entire game without having a single strategic or competent thought? I don't think so. She's going to end up just outside of the top 10 at number 11. We're into the top 10. The best of the best, I guess you could say. This is a tier up from everybody we've talked about before, where I feel on any given season, in any given circumstance, any of these players could win the game or have won the game. But the weakest game of them all was somebody funny enough who made it all the way to the end, but fell just short. That is Blake from Traitors Australia Season 2. Blakey boy wasn't that bad. If anything, he was kinda good. The biggest thing going against Blake is that he didn't win, and he played on a season with Sam, who overshadowed him in every conceivable way. But I'm here to hype my boy Blake up, at least until I get to the negatives. So let me show you that he played a damn good game to get to the end the way he did. Blake is somebody who I think has perfected the art of speaking only when spoken to, which is a strategy that isn't used very often but worked very well for Blake. He never overshares, doesn't splurt out random nonsense, but when he's asked a question or asked for his opinion, he gives it and is very compelling when doing so, which is a great strategy on the Traitors. He had such great connections that when he was pushed hard by Annabelle and Luke, his name was shut down instantly, and moving forward, when people would bring up the Annabelle and Luke debacle, only Sam's name was being mentioned, not Blake's. And he was the best setup at the endgame over everybody else to take that win, which is a big boost to his maneuvering to get himself in that position compared to everybody else. Now that the positives are over, let me talk about the fatal flaw in Blake's game. Why didn't you vote out Sam, you ding dong? Oh my god, it was so frustrating to watch Blake go so long while just being Sam's right-hand man. I like the strategy for a little bit because Sam is kind of a psychopath and all of that heat is going to get put on Sam while Blake could just chill in the background. And by the time we reached the endgame, Blake was going to eventually cut Sam and take the crown. But he just didn't do it. So what was all this for if you weren't going to cut Sam? And I get he wasn't blindly loyal because he literally tried to take out Sam earlier in the season, but my god, it got embarrassing at the end. And the worst part of it all is Blake had a prime opportunity to take the whole game at the final 5. Liam specifically called out Sam and Camille as the traitors and was full in on that movement. So what does Blake have to do? Get fucking Liam and Sarah, the only 2 faithfuls left, together to vote out Sam and then vote out Camille. And then end the game and win that goddamn money. It's so easy. I cannot believe that didn't happen. Maybe Sarah was that much of an idiot that she didn't want to vote out Sam or Camille because she's just the single worst player to ever play this game. But regardless, I still put blame on Blake for not taking this opportunity and willingly taking the Traitor's Dilemma risk with Sam at the end game, instead of taking out the other 2 traitors and stealing all the money for himself. That almost should have gotten him demoted even more because of that boneheaded decision when he was right there for the win. But I need to keep it real because Blake still played an underrated game of the Traitors and was in the situation to win the game. The way he played the game was deserving of a win, but one single mistake took it all away and leaves Blake with no money and just number 10 on the list. That's a rough day, man. Number 9 is somebody who I think people forget about, either because of the season he's from or the fact that he gets overshadowed by another traitor from that very same season. But I think this guy plays a brilliant game that was upended by something out of his control, and that's Dan from the Traitors New Zealand Season 1. God damn it, man, Dan fucking killed it, and he does not get enough credit considering how much of a threat he was coming into that season. Strategically, I don't know anybody who is clearly better than him. He has such a mind for the game, and any of these games for that matter, it just felt natural and right, and you never really had to worry if he gave anything away. The only person who had any semblance of a clue he was a traitor was Brooke, who's like his best friend in real life, who he also recruits, so that issue is solved very quickly. There are not many people that have played the traitors that I would trust more to make it to the end of the game than Dan here. And the worst part of it is I don't really have anything negative to say on Dan's game. He gets taken out earlier than he should have because Robbie, who they did recruit just to screw over, winked right at him after she was voted out. And that is his first suspicion of the entire game because of Robbie's wink. Not anything he did. It's pretty much on the level of what Kieran did to Wilfred, except it doesn't take much thinking to realize what she just did there. Robbie just straight up said, "Yo, Dan, you're a traitor, man." And despite that, Dan nearly survives the next roundtable, only getting banished in a 5-4 vote, which is insanely impressive. Now, I don't think Dan had any real chance of winning after the Robbie moment, but to have no suspicion on you for most of the game up until that moment, with no glaring flaws, that's an insanely good game that I could have even considered ranking higher than number 9. But because he didn't make it as far, it's more of the fact that the people above him are more impressive than anything Dan did wrong to lower his spot. So he stops his climb to a very respectable number 9 placement. Now for number 8. Somebody I was so ready to place much, much lower on this list than where he is right now. I wanted to poke out all of his flaws on the rewatch, added to the fact that out of everybody left, he's the only person that did not make it to that fire of truth or circle of truth ceremony shit. And he wasn't even that close. But god damn it, I ended my rewatch more impressed with his game, so I just couldn't deny it anymore, and that's why Paul from the Traitors UK Season 2 is at number 8. I'm sorry, I really tried to hate watch this cocky son of a bitch, but I was impressed. He starts out by being beloved by the entire house, like Mr. Popular on steroids, which puts him in an incredible position. He was very vocal during roundtables and meetings. When he did get confronted, which was a lot, the manipulation tactics this man pulled off scared the fuck out of me. They were incredibly impressive. Like when he just asked everybody to send him home because he was having a hard time to buy sympathy is always going to stick out of my mind because goddamn, that's innovative and it's good. And then the showdown against Miles was chaotic in the best way possible. He fought for his life and pulled through and ended up looking like a hero by the end of it. How the fuck does he do that? Like the highs of Paul's game are some of the single best moves any traitor has made in the entire show's history. And I can't deny that. But there's one thing that's stopping Paul from being higher on this list. And that's Paul. Who would have guessed the cocky son of a bitch had an ego to him? An ego that eventually killed his game. Putting himself in the dungeon was extremely short-sighted, and all because of his ego. He assumed he was going to be voted most popular in the dungeon and be granted safety. And when he wasn't and eventually turned up alive over Meg was when a lot of people started looking at him a little sideways. A huge blunder that does not happen if Paul just kept his damn ego in check. To add on to that, he completely underestimated Harry, who was the person that eventually did him in. He looked at this 22-year-old pretty boy that was a traitor alongside him and assumed, this fucking guy has no idea what he's doing. I'll let him ride my coattails for a while before I cut him off at the end of the game. And he held that opinion of Harry all the way until Paul was banished. Meanwhile, Harry has been plotting against him for a long time, planting seeds and eventually leading the charge against Paul to his demise. And that's an ego thing for Paul. That is Paul assuming he's smarter and all around better than Harry, that he doesn't need to worry about him until he no longer needs him. It kind of makes me more mad because if Paul didn't have one of the biggest egos I've ever seen in the show's history, he'd be one of the most incredible traitors I've ever seen and very easily could have won this game based on his trajectory. But those self-caused mistakes really did him in. So despite all the great moments, and there were some great moments, the results are what leave him from the top tier players and ends up at number 8. Lucky number 7, somebody who's probably one of the more flawed players left. It's either this guy or my number 6. Regardless, they still played a killer Traitors game against a really good cast as well, but just came up short of the win. That's Brooke from the Traitors New Zealand Season 1. Brooke is a weird case. A recruited traitor, but he was a very early recruit because of the Lauren and Matt exits. And I feel like he took the game by the horns and made sure he was the shot caller at every waking moment so the game would go his way at all times. Nearly every murder and nearly every banishment was Brooke's call, and for most of the game, Brooke looked like a really loud faithful. A unique strategy not done by many traitors, but it was a smart one. And he made sure everybody who was at the end of the game was everyone Brooke wanted at the end of the game. The only problem there is I think Brooke really botched the endgame stretch. He got way too trigger happy about targeting Colin at Final 5. Now, he clearly outplays Colin, which I will give him credit for, but he needed another traitor at the end of the game with him. Somebody at the end, aside from Julia, that would be an easy vote out in front of him, which he didn't do, and when Julia reveals to be a faithful, the only play at the end was to vote Brooke out, which brings me to my last qualm with Brooke's game. While I thought he did a great job creating a tight 3 with Sam and Anna, 2 people that helped him survive the endgame, he knew he was the odd man out of that trio. He understood that and tried to get Anna or Sam to flip at the last moment, but that's a losing battle that I feel should not be your only hope and your only outcome of winning. He needed either more options at the endgame or a better option at the endgame because he was slowly walking to his demise when he allowed those 2 to make the end of the game together. It's a very different game than most traitors. One that he dominated and played really well in most of the time. but little mistakes at the end stopped him from winning and stopped him from moving higher on this list at number 7. We made it to number 6, somebody I'm sure everyone was waiting for me to talk about. The single most controversial person to ever be on the Traitors, in my opinion. Is that fair to say? I don't know, you tell me. I got Sam from the Traitors Australia Season 2. Yep, that guy has made it his way to number 6. And you can't deny the complete dominance he had of that game from beginning until almost the very end. His game feels very overplayed because it pretty much encompassed the whole season, but throwing Ash under the bus and getting her banished so early, just so he looks like the traitor hunter, was a great move on this specific season. That brought him so much credibility and got a lot of people to follow every single word he says. He survives the attack from Luke and Annabelle in dominating fashion, getting rid of both of them without getting fallout because of it. And then for the rest of the game, every single faithful banished said his name as they were leaving. Nothing short of incredible to see Sam murder anybody he didn't need by night and then banish the people who were threats to him during the day. Back and forth without fail. Getting both of the traitors to do everything he says and willingly go to the final 3 as just the traitors is nothing short of a miracle, and that game that I just described is the single most dominant game of the traitors that has ever been played, and it's not very close. However, despite Sam's claims that he played the best Traitors game that's ever existed, I don't believe he did. And that is why I am here to now tell you every single flaw that was a part of Sam's messy game, and why, despite the dominance, he was never going to touch the top 5. The issue I have with Sam's game is that once you catch on to his shtick, you can see right through him. The second these dumb faithfuls saw that this nice country boy act was a fake and his strategy he was using was being repeated round after round after round, it became incredibly obvious Sam was a traitor to them. The reason it worked for Sam was because, like I said, he banished everybody who finally figured it out consecutively before they could do anything about it. And then he kept the idiots who never figured it out all the way until the end of the game. It's incredible he was never caught by more than one person at a time, or else he might have been screwed. He played so messy and so sloppily most of the time. These arguments he would have during every roundtable were the exact same argument every single time. Yet it would swoon the same people every single time. I'm getting mad again just recapping his game because it was so flawed and so annoying because somehow it worked despite the holes in his logic. However, the point I'm going to end off with isn't hating just the facts of the matter. Sam was never going to win the game. That is the biggest knock against Sam and why he is at the top of my 3rd tier of players and not in the 2nd or the 1st tier. No matter the situation, no matter what happens, Sam was never going to win the Traitors Australia Season 2 after a certain point. He would have been turned on and betrayed by Blake or Camille, been left as a sitting duck in the endgame, or be stuck in the Traitors Dilemma where nobody walks away with any money. If anything, the Traitors Dilemma was the best case scenario for Sam. Blake and Camille automatically lose the game with Sam at the end because he's always going to steal the money. But that also raises a problem. Sam's actions all season made it way too obvious he was stealing the money. So the other traitors were never going to split the money because they knew Sam would have steal written down and nothing else. It's an incredible game to make it to the end, but it's a horrible game if you want to win the traitors, which Sam did not, unlike most of the people left to talk about. And that's why Sammy Boy is stuck outside of the top 5 and outside of the top tiers at number 6. We're into the top 5, and a top 5 divided into 2 tiers, like I've been saying. The next 3 players I'll be talking about are my tier 2. Really amazing traitor games that led to a win, or should have led to a win. And the top tier is the 2 players that I believe mastered the Traitors as a game in their respective seasons. So all 5 of these players played excellent games, and I will really be picking at straws to divide and separate them moving forward. So coming in at number 5 will be the first winner I am talking about on this list, so technically the worst traitor winner in the show so far, which upsets me to say because I love this person and their game. That game being Alex, the winner of the Traitors Australia Season 1. Like, Alex played one of the most perfect and well-executed traitor games I've ever seen. And it was the very first one. If I'm being real, the only true argument I have for why Alex isn't higher on the list is because she's the only recruit left on the board. And that might even make her game more impressive to some people because winning the game as a recruit is near impossible for somebody to do. And yet Alex laid out the blueprint for how to do it. The seamless transition from faithful to traitor as far as her behavior goes was outstanding. To have those seemingly genuine emotions at breakfast or during roundtables is what got her virtually no suspicion at any point in the game. To have a recruitment so late in the game and yet nobody for a minute thinks Alex could have been the one that got recruited is insane to me. The seeds she slowly planted to eventually throw Nigel under the bus and get him banished was flawless. And that leads her to the endgame where I think she was virtually untouchable on all angles. Teresa, Lewis, and Craig were all wrapped around her finger, and her only adversity was Kate. But none of that mattered because Craig was the ace up her sleeve the entire game. Somebody she was building a relationship with and will protect for this very moment. If she was at the endgame with him and somebody else, he would always vote out that other person over Alex no matter what. And it worked out to perfection and led her to a win. Again, there isn't anything bad I can say about Alex's game. It's nearly perfect. The only thing I can do to settle the debate and separate her from other players is that she was recruited late into the season. Aside from that, amazing. Incredible game, incredible win. She's number 5 on the list. Now with number 4, straight up, this was such a hard decision to make. I was going back and forth between my number 4 and number 3 pick all the way until right now when I'm recording this, still considering switching these two around because it's that close. I'm choosing between somebody who made less mistakes but didn't actually win the game due to circumstances that I don't think were their fault, or somebody who made more mistakes but also had higher highs and ended up winning the entire game. And that was the game I felt was ultimately better at the end, so stuck at number 4 is Wilfred from the Traitors UK Season 1. Before I get into anything else, to be ranked as the 4th best Traitor game, nearly number 3 of all Traitors, as somebody who didn't end up winning the game, is insanely impressive, and Wilfred played one of my favorite Traitors games I've ever watched from start to finish. Coming in with the perception as the happy-go-lucky player, just enjoying his experience here while being hyper-strategic underneath the whole time, was a great story to follow all season. Getting heat from so early on from Maddie, who is convinced Wilf is a traitor and brings that up every single round, only for Wilf to handle that so well, even with the torment and accusations being constant. He allowed people to feel bad for him or believe that Maddie is just crazy without actively saying any of these things. He never had to plant these seeds. The way he was acting gave people sympathy for him, and that was huge for his game. That was his MO the entire season. He took any situation that may be harmful for him or a problem against him and spun it to make him look more innocent. The constant accusations did nothing except give him a great excuse for why he hasn't been murdered yet. And that lasted the entire season while he emotionally and psychologically fucked with everybody's heads. But of course, the moment everybody talks about at the end with Kieran not so subtly throwing Wilf, his traitor teammate, under the bus on his way out for backstabbing him. And Wilf's game unravels before his very eyes. Not before begging and swearing on anything he can think of that he's not a traitor and Kieran is just some weirdo and not a sore loser trying to throw his traitor teammate under the bus. It's such a shame to look back on this season that was dominated by Wilf from beginning to end and for him to not be a winner. But if we're being real, he should be. He put his heart and soul into the game and did everything he possibly could have to win. And the only reason he didn't was because his traitor teammate was a sore loser and exposed him to everybody else. Which I guess can bring up the only negative I have in Wilf's game. He shouldn't have recruited Kieran. If he recruited Aaron, the only other guy left at the time, maybe the game goes differently and Wilf manages to win. Which is truly the only thing I'm using to justify why I have Wilf at 4 and not at 3. But it's an amazing game from start to finish that came up just short of the win. But I have more confidence in Wilf than most anybody else who has ever played the Traitors to make it far and win the game most of the time. This felt like an anomaly to me, and that is why he is 4th place on the list, just short of the top 3. Now for number 3, somebody I'm shocked became a traitor on his season, somebody I'm shocked actually won his season, and somebody I'm shocked after all of this, he's made his way onto number 3 on the traitor ranking list. It's fucking Magic Mike from the Traitors Canada Season 1. Why and how did this man of all people play such an amazing game? I didn't want to rank him this high, but goddammit, there's so much to love. But I'm actually going to go in reverse order for Mike when explaining why he's at 3. I feel it would be better to talk about all the issues I have with Mike's game and then go over everything he did well to cap it off. To start, I don't think Mike was that great socially. He wasn't an outcast or anything, but Mike never really had that person or that group of people that would ride and die for him, which I think is so important in this game and a flaw Mike had, especially towards the end game when you could see groups forming. Groups Mike was not a part of. That and Mike had some messy roundtable moments. I'll get to the positive aspects of Mike at the roundtable, but every time he did speak, his lines felt rehearsed. Like, he came into each roundtable, prepared 1 or 2 questions to ask 1 or 2 people, and then would sit back the rest of the time. That felt like somebody who tried to talk at the roundtable as strategy, not with an actual purpose. So he's a bit sloppy for a magician, but that's kind of all the negatives I have. There's a lot of good that overturns the bad and leads to his eventual win, which I'd love to mention. To start, I would be disappointed in myself if I didn't talk about that endgame that Mike had no business of winning. Mike was a sitting duck at the final 5. He was with Trayvon, the obvious next target, but also the person targeting him the most, Donna, somebody who was extremely unreliable as a number, and then a duo in Gurleen and Leroy who have been each other's number 1s the entire game, all of which are faithfuls. And while yes, it's good that Mike found his way into that duo and became a trio with Gurleen and Leroy, this was a very similar situation to Brooke. He was the odd man out, and when it came down to 3, after the other players revealed to be faithfuls, he's going to get targeted and voted out, just to be sure. So because he had no road with Trayvon or Donna, his only path to victory was to somehow convince Gurleen to turn on her number 1 ally. And it worked. Somehow, someway, Mike managed to pull that off, and the entire finale was a Magic Mike masterclass that I have to tip my hat to and give credit for. It's probably the most impressive thing anybody aside from the top 2 players have done in the Traitors ever. Then rewinding back to other moments in the game, he does a flawless push to get Kuzi banished. He had his name mentioned at nearly every roundtable, which was never taken as a serious accusation to get him banished, but was a great cover-up and a great excuse he could use as to why he never got murdered. And going back to the roundtable discussions, no matter how forced Mike's speeches were and how they felt, people listened. He was a super influential figure during those roundtables that people could rely on and people used as a figurehead to target whoever they wanted to go for that night. So much about Mike's game should not have worked. And it's a little unethical to what you would expect to see from the 3rd best Traitors game of all time. But shit, it worked, it was very impressive, and I have to reward that with the number 3 spot on the list. We are down to the top 2, and by this point I'm sure you can deduce who those 2 players are. 2 winners, 2 extremely dominant winners, but in 2 completely different ways. These are my tier 1 Traitors players, and I would not be mad at any of these players being number 1 over the other because they're both so deserving. But I had to make a decision, and based on my walkthrough of each of their games, my number 2 is going to Harry from the Traitors UK Season 2. Come on. Harry played one of the most unbelievable Traitors games I've ever witnessed. He dominated, manipulated, backstabbed, and overcame adversity all throughout his run. Of the top 2, his game is definitely the more action-packed as he had a lot more happening around him that he had to adjust to in order to make it to the end and win. And overall, I think Harry had the smarter cast of the top 2. From the start, he made an impression, but more importantly, made his voice heard. Gave theories and his personal opinion at every roundtable, never giving anybody the opportunity to question where his head was at because that was the persona he was giving off to everybody. The straightforward and honest military boy. He was never afraid to turn on any of his Traitor teammates. You have to give major credit to Harry for the way he turned that Paul and Miles situation to his favor. Paul should be coming out of that situation as the hero with no suspicion on him. But Harry kept on throwing seeds during the roundtable and after the roundtable about how that debate between Miles and Paul looked like 2 traitors going at each other. Genius play. And then the shield recruitment was perfectly pulled off to not only clear his name, not only being able to recruit somebody without anyone else knowing, but was the literal reason 3 people got banished in a row. 3 banishments in a row. That is a perfectly executed plan. And he had something that I feel all great players need, a ride or die. Molly was Harry's person that he knew would never turn on him no matter what, and would be that oh so unlucky person standing with him at the end of the game as he collects all of that money for himself. However, the only real negative I have on Harry's game and the reason he falls to number 2, at least in my mind, is because that almost didn't happen. Harry's one true blind spot in this game was Jazz. He never knew Jazz was suspicious of him due to the conversations that were leaked with Paul to Jazz. And he willingly took Jazz all the way to the end of the game thinking there was no way Jazz would ever think he was a traitor. And then if he did, there'd be no way Molly would vote him out over Jazz. But towards the end of the game, Jazz was going to work, and he had Molly convinced to the point where she wrote down Harry's name on that chalkboard, goddammit. Harry almost lost the game, right then and there. Until he pulled out the ultimate gaslight and manipulation tactics to get Molly to second guess herself and change her mind, which in itself is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. So his one true mistake in the entire game was something that he ended up fixing and overcoming to still win the game. This is one of the most insane games played from one of the most insane seasons on reality TV. So well deserving of this recognition and the number 2 spot on the list. But he couldn't be number 1. Nobody else could be number 1 except for the one and only Cirie Fields from the Traitors US Season 1. The person who I feel is the best traitor in the franchise's history and played the best Traitors game in the franchise's history. There is no point in the game in which Cirie was in danger. She never had her name written down one time. Something nobody else on this list can say. To come into the game as one of, if not the biggest name out of anybody on the cast, and to run through the game with so much control as she did, is incredibly impressive. Not only did Cirie avoid any suspicion and pressure with so much control, she was the swing vote at many of the roundtables. She was dictating who was staying and who was going, not only in the murders, but in the banishments. Something she did so only her game was benefited, nobody else's. And of course, I tease this when talking about Phaedra. There's only one other person I feel rivaled Phaedra as the best social game ever in the Traitors, and that's Cirie fucking Fields. She knows how to talk to people and make them feel important while keeping them close to her. We have proof of this on Survivor, Big Brother, and of course, the Traitors. People feel a bond to Cirie that is always more than game level because that is the type of person Cirie is and that is the energy she gives off. It's a skill I could only dream of having, but she's got the whole damn package. And of course, after an entire season of dominating the competition, Cirie ends with possibly her best play of the whole season, the endgame. Her perfect endgame where she was able to get Kate out, and instead of taking the easy win with Ari and splitting the prize, she chooses to betray Ari and get him to literally bow out of the game and admit he's a traitor because that is how loyal to Cirie he was. Are you kidding me? That takes manipulation to another extreme. And of course she wins the whole damn thing. From start to finish, front to back, there's not a single hiccup, roadblock, or inconvenience that stood in Cirie's way. And when you are playing the Traitors, that's nearly impossible to do. So the fact that Cirie managed to accomplish that speaks to how incredible of a game she played. And to play the perfect game of the Traitors, it deserves nothing less than the number 1 spot as the best traitor in the franchise's history. Why did nobody tell me this video would be stupid long? Regardless, there was no other video I wanted to start my offseason with than ranking every goddamn traitor in the show's history. And the worst part about it is that this list will only continue to grow and inevitably a sequel will have to come from it. But not now, that's way into the future. Where we sit right now, get ready for more Traitors videos. I have plenty more ideas for videos coming very soon, so if you're big into the Traitors franchise, this is the place to be, I'm telling ya. Expect some Survivor content thrown in the mix as well. And then by the time we hit Big Brother, plenty of Big Brother videos are coming out during that time, both short and long formatted. The moral of the story is so much is planned and I got a lot of shit to do, but it will be worth it as long as y'all enjoy. Please let me know down below how you would rank every traitor in the show's history thus far. It's such a subjective concept, but a really fun video nonetheless. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. That's gonna do it for me. If you made it to the end of the video, I love ya. Platonically, of course. And I will undoubtedly see ya when I see ya. Bye-bye.